Welcome to See You on the Other Side, where the world of the mysterious collides with the world of entertainment. A discussion of art, music, movies, spirituality, the weird, and self-discovery. And now, your hosts, musicians and entertainers who have their own weakness for the weird, Mike and Wendy from the band Sunspot.
Oh man, greetings to you guys on a lovely Mother's Day.
Greetings.
Happy Mother's Day, all.
Yeah.
Yes, happy Mother's Day to all the mothers out there.
Yes.
Hope you enjoyed your brunches.
Right.
I think I know a lot of those mothers.
Oh, yeah. Anyway, so it feels like this is the perfect person to talk about on Mother's Day because Mary Shelley did try. She had a bunch of kids. A lot of them didn't make it.
Well, that was par for the course.
Right.
During the time period.
Yeah, but also part of the inspiration for why she might have been interested in Frankenstein. So anyway, greetings to you guys too. I am in the balmy and humid Austin, Texas today. And it is still 87 degrees at 9:23.
Yeah. That's my kind of weather.
Yeah.
Sounds lovely.
Yes, I'm enjoying some sweating. How are things in the Wisco? What am I missing?
Nothing.
Actually, it was a really nice day today.
Oh, good. Good.
Yeah. It was
Not
overcast.
87 degrees, nice.
No, but it was overcast, but it was nice enough to go hiking and not be too sweaty and gross. And,
I heard you saw the Mothman.
I did. Well, I saw something that could have been confused for the Mothman.
He's everywhere.
It was actually some cranes flying overhead, but they did have a giant wingspan.
No. The Mothman is much more common than sandhill cranes.
At least in our area of Wisconsin, it seems like he shows up all the time. Well, that sounds great. It sounds like summer has finally arrived, and that really does put all of us in a good and exciting mood for a big summer. And just a quick plug, speaking of fun summer things, if you guys are in the Midwest, make sure you check out American Hauntings in Alton, Illinois, and that's going to be June 22nd to the 24th, and you'll have a chance to hang out with us in person. So if you're
That's right.
if you're anywhere near the Midwest, please check out American Hauntings. You get more information at AmericanHauntings.com. You're going to hear Wendy and I sing you some beautiful songs that we've been writing for the podcast. And
and I'm going to be presenting.
Yeah, so this is going to be a lot of fun.
That's awesome. I can't wait.
Yeah.
I love that event, and I'm looking forward to another year of meeting all kinds of fun and weird fellow weirdos and hearing some interesting presentations and checking out cool vendor booths and just all the neat events that they do. They do a great job of it. So hope to meet more people there
The
this
door
year.
prizes. I want to
Oh,
win
and the door prizes
this year.
yes.
Come on.
Who I'm excited about meeting in person is Robert Damon Schneck, who wrote The Bye Bye Man and who is the historian of the string.
Yeah.
And so he's coming
So
from New
cool.
York.
Yes.
And that's
Oh,
gonna
man,
be a
I
lot of
am
fun.
excited to meet him too.
Right.
Because I love all his posts.
Yeah, so it's going to be a lot of fun. Anyway, I just wanted to put a quick plug in because that means you got a few weeks to get yourself ready for that. Now,
Start planning.
speaking of fun Sunspot music, we're also on iTunes. And Wendy, has anybody said anything nice about our podcast on iTunes lately?
Oh, well, it's funny you should ask because
is funny.
actually, just this week, somebody said something nice in
That's
iTunes.
nice.
Yeah.
I like that better when than when they throw feces.
Oh, so much better. So much better
Smells
than
better.
having feces thrown at us. But yeah, so under the See You on the Other Side page in iTunes, in the iTunes store, you can leave a review for free.
Doesn't even cost
We won't
Someone
charge
did
you to
that.
review us.
And somebody that did that was Mr. Windujati,
Ooh, hello.
who says, "Your posts are always uplifting and inspiring. Thanks for the excellent work."
All right.
Well, that's very nice. And thank you for taking the time to do that, Windujati. And that was a 5-star review. So
Yay.
Yay. Thank you, Mr.
for that. We
Windujati.
appreciate it. And hopefully that'll help our podcast bubble its way up to the top and get some new listeners who find us through the iTunes
Absolutely.
search.
You guys have made us hit the new and noteworthy list in iTunes at least 3 times. So we always
Wow.
appreciate that kind of support. And of course, we appreciate
Very
the
nice.
support of our Patreons who we hung out with last Wednesday and had a conversation about ghosts in the hood.
That was so fun.
It was a lot of fun.
And in an exciting twist, one of the stars of Ghost in the Hood actually replied to one of our Patreon's Twitter posts. And
wow.
there's a chance that we will have him either on the show or as a special guest in one of our hangouts in the near future.
That would be so awesome.
Yeah, he's totally
That's
into
right.
it. So
stay tuned because there's more developing on that one, but we'll keep everybody posted.
you guys can be part of that community, othersidepodcast.com/donate. But now that the niceties and the plugs are out of the way, we're on to
Time to get ugly.
time to get nasty.
Let's talk about somebody with plugs in his neck.
Yeah,
Good one.
quite. Hey, this one is near and dear to my heart because I think Frankenstein was my favorite of the classic, like the Universal monsters. When you think of the Wolfman, Frankenstein, Dracula. Frankenstein was my personal favorite of those. And remember they tried to redo those movies in like the 1990s. We had Bram Stoker's Dracula, directed by Francis Ford Coppola.
Okay, I did like that one.
Yeah.
I gotta say, I really enjoyed that one.
Yeah, it was
and
great.
I still do
It was
to this day.
Keanu was in it too. Vampires.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah, and Gary Oldman. I like Gary Oldman.
I mean, he was
and
fantastic in that movie.
He was at his, sexy best, I think.
Sexy
in that movie, he had some fashion going on, some colored glasses.
He did have color
I
glasses.
dug him. I dug it. I dug the whole wolf scene.
And then they made a Wolfman movie with Jack Nicholson.
Yeah.
Remember that Jack Nicholson turned into a werewolf?
Yeah. That was a good one.
Mm-hmm.
And there's been one more recently, too.
Yes, the one with Anthony Hopkins and Benicio del Toro, the Wolfman.
Yeah.
But my favorite of those movies, and I know it is the most critically derided one. All the critics thought it was crap. But maybe I was just the right age for it. I think I was 17 years old. And I just came out Halloween 1994 and was Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. And directed and starring, who, I was in theater or whatever in high school. And Kenneth Branagh was like a theater
Kenneth
hero.
Branagh. Yeah. Really, he was. I love that movie Dead Again. That's still on my favorites list.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that was a really imaginative one regarding reincarnation.
Yeah, but Kenneth Branagh as Dr. Frankenstein, Robert De Niro as the creature.
Yes, and his mistress, Helena Bonham Carter.
Right, and Helena Bonham Carter, that homewrecker. She is a
homewrecker.
Right, she's the one. So what happened was during the filming of the movie, so Kenneth Branagh was married to
Emma Thompson.
Emma Thompson, that's right. All classy. They're in Dead Again together. And
I love Emma.
of course, everybody loves Emma Thompson. But he goes off on that movie and Helena, he gets it out with Helena Bonham Carter, who's at her early 90s sultry best.
Yeah.
And then they become a couple, and it's all over for Emma Thompson, and Kenneth Branagh looks like he just ruined, because he did ruin his relationship, let's be real. And then Helena Bonham Carter, that just goes to, she eventually finds Tim Burton and blah, blah, blah. But the whole thing is, that movie I just thought was the perfect storm of romanticism, special effects.
Right, and who is the monster in that movie?
No, it's Robert De Niro.
I know, right?
Are you burning at me? Are you burning that torch at me? So I don't do a Robert De Niro. I don't have it. Are you pitchforking at me?
I get it, though. I get where you're going.
Thank you.
And I don't think people realize, though, that Frankenstein, the story, the modern Prometheus, that story is 200 years old now this year.
Yeah, it was first published in 1818, and that's kind of a holy crap moment because it feels very modern. I mean, it doesn't feel modern as in 2018, but it feels modern as in a creation of the 20th century, doesn't it? Because we all have that idea of Dr. Frankenstein in the castle and using electricity and the great 1931 fight. He flips the switch. It's alive, and he's screaming it. And
I mean, very evocative, and it is. Frankenstein is the first modern horror novel, and it's written by a teenage girl. And that is, I think, a startling realization for some people because they're just used to teenage girls being the victims in such movies.
At least today.
Not being the creators of, a modern horror story that has really persisted and, is even more relevant today, 200 years later. I mean, it's incredible that, somebody could write that.
Well, first of all, how smart you got to be.
A story with such staying power.
Have you guys read most of the things that like 16-year-old people write? I mean, it doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman. Like most of it's crap. The thing is, I'm on the internet. These people have access to the greatest texts of all time in their learning, and half the people dangle their participles all over their sentences. But you know what I mean? Like most of it can't do it. And so let's go back. Let's talk a little bit about Mary Shelley.
And her parents too, because they were a significant influence as well.
And I think people don't realize. Well, we'll get to this in a second. So you get Mary Wollstonecraft Shelley. Mary Wollstonecraft Godwin Shelley. So she took 4 names. Is the daughter of Mary Wollstonecraft and her Mary Wollstonecraft husband William Godwin, and they're both like political radicals in 18th century England. Mary Wollstonecraft is like a radical feminist, and so is William Godwin. But William Godwin was preaching was a leaving of feudalism. They were saying that the landed classes, the aristocracy in the United Kingdom, in England, that they were oppressive, and they were oppressing the common man, the serf, and that feudalism had to end. Now we're getting by this point. This is 1797. She was born. We already have the French Revolution. We already had the American Revolution. So these ideas of the king not being a representative of the people and stuff like that, that's starting to spread. And this is starting to spread in the UK. And so William Godwin is a dangerous author, because he's writing about these things. And Mary Wollstonecraft is also dangerous because she's saying that women are equal to men, right?
Oh,
right.
dear.
Yeah, talk about scary. That scares me today in 2018.
Yeah.
And so her parents are really ahead of their time.
Yeah, think of them as hippies. Think about them as the Keatons in Family Ties.
There you go.
And really, I mean, when you look at the 1800s, back in the teen years of the 1800s, all the way to when spiritualism started, 1847. 1848. This was a time period of revolution. And so when you look at the 1960s, a lot of the ideas that we popularly think of as from the 1960s actually came from these political radicals in the 1800s. And, like free love, for example, vegetarianism, a lot of this stuff has its roots in the 19th century.
Well, free love is something that Mary Shelley certainly practiced.
Right.
Okay, so the thing is, her mother, Mary Wollstonecraft, dies like 12 days after Mary's born. And then
complications.
Her father names her that, Mary, to be as like a tribute to her mother. But the thing is, so he's a writer, he's a political radical, he's poor. What did you really see that one coming? So he's and so he's writing, and so he's got to find himself another wife. He's got to get himself somebody with some money, and he does. He does get remarried, and he is devoted to his new wife, and which is nice because like even Mary Wollstonecraft, like she had an affair with somebody like with an American. And it was scandalous. And she sends the American a letter that says like, I am pregnant with a creature or something like that. And he's like, bye. He's like, I'm out. And so that's Mary Shelley's stepsister. And he's like,
I see.
He's like, I'm out. And so, but then Mary Wollstonecraft, she dies, almost immediately after Mary Shelley is born. And then, her father remarries. Mary's got issues with the stepmother. They don't really get along. And so Percy Shelley comes by, and Percy Bysshe Shelley is a rich guy. He's a couple years older than Mary, and he's a wealthy aristocrat, but he's also a political radical. He's an atheist. He doesn't believe in God. And so he also believes that the institutions must be cast aside. And so he's a radical himself. And so he starts hanging around the house, and he says that he's going to pay off some of William Godwin's debts, because this is his political idol. This is somebody that he admires. He's rich. He wants to pay off his debts. He's also spends way too much money and eventually can't pay off the debts, but he's promising that, so then they all get to hang out. Well, Percy starts bringing that free love into he starts bringing that free love into their home. So like 1814, the thing is he's already married too, and he's got a pregnant wife. He's hanging out with Mary and her stepsister Claire Claremont, and then he's like, yeah, I'm out. And so he just takes Mary and Claire, and they take off and they just start roaming through Europe while his pregnant wife is at home.
Man.
Pregnant wife kills herself, so that's nice. And when they get back from Europe, they come back to England, Mary's pregnant with Percy's child. So, but this is several children she would bear Percy over the years, and they would pass away. So this is 1816 that they finally get married. And after Percy's wife kills himself, she's been trying to have a child for him. And then he also got it on with Claire. So this is all a weird, free love thing, because it's like, hey, if it's good for you, might be good for your stepsister. The whole
recipe for drama.
Right. And he's rich, and if you look at pictures of him, I'm looking at a picture of Percy Shelley right now, and he's a poet. He's one of the romantics. They call him the romantics because they had radical political ideas. They were obviously into, if you can't be with the one you love, then love the one
love the one you're with.
Love the one you're with.
Oh man.
So what happens is, even though Percy eventually marries Mary, obviously William Godwin is not cool with any of this. So the guy who is like a radical feminist doesn't want his daughter and his stepdaughter ruined, quote unquote ruined, which was what they called a woman who her virginity was lost before marriage. So this is when the rubber meets the road. The political radical feminist William Godwin's like, yeah, well, that's good enough for your kids, but not for mine, which I think is funny.
Well, and I think too, you can be a feminist and realize that, your children are going to be put in harm's way because of the way the current culture is. And also seeing that, maybe some of these guys just saying we're using, the political tumult of the time to take advantage.
So just like the guys in the 1960s.
Right. He realized that, they're all like, oh yeah, free love. It's the concept, man. And really,
it's cool, baby. Puff, puff, give.
It's just a way to take advantage.
Well, these guys are all rich at least. So, nobody's
so that makes it okay.
So at least the girls are getting fed.
Yeah.
But
nice sugar daddies.
So in 1816, they run off to Geneva, Switzerland.
Right.
1816 is known as the year without a summer. And this is because a volcanic winter event was caused by the massive 1815 eruption of Mount Tambora in the Dutch East Indies, which was the largest eruption in at least 1,300 years at the time. And so they called it, the world was already in part of a little ice age that started in the 14th century and had been going on for a few centuries, where the earth was cooler at that time anyway. But then when you have the volcanic winter, because of all of the ash in the air,
blacking out the sun.
There was a major food shortage across the northern hemisphere. They called it the poverty year, and they also called it 1800 and froze to death.
That's my favorite.
Yeah. So
1800 and froze.
1800 and froze to death. That's kind of funny, but a lot of people died because of that whole thing.
Okay, so that part's not.
Yeah,
funny.
that part sucks. But, you know,
But the tagline's good.
so in June 1816, incessant rainfall. I think Mary calls it a wet, ungenial summer. And so they're all hanging out in Lake Geneva, Switzerland, not Lake Geneva, Wisconsin, which would be totally sweet.
yeah, and instead of frolicking in the forest like fairies, these romantics had to turn away from nature and go inside because it was just so horrible outside.
Frolic indoors.
They had to frolic indoors.
Which these guys were already
Probably
doing.
naked.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Of course.
Totally.
I mean,
That's how all the best frolicking
Exactly.
occurs.
Well, the thing is, if you're not frolicking naked, you're doing something wrong. So, okay. And so it's Mary Shelley, Percy Shelley, Lord Byron, and Dr. John William Polidori, who's Lord Byron's doctor. And they have to stay indoors at Villa Diodati. I don't know if I'm saying it right. But that's where they stayed at Villa Diodati near Lake Geneva. And they're having a Swiss holiday, and they got to spend most of that wet, ungenial summer indoors. And one night, Lord Byron says, let's all write a ghost story.
Right. So they can huddle around the fire and tell ghost stories. It does sound fun.
Yeah.
I mean,
it does.
Lord Byron does kind of sound fun to me. I'm sorry. And I love She Walks in Beauty. That's one of my favorite poems. So he knew how to do it.
Yeah, well, of course he knew how to do it. Like, because he did it.
He knew how to-
He did it with
how to
Mary.
sway young girls'
and again.
He did it with
With
Mary.
everyone.
He did it with Percy. He did it with Dr. Polidori. He did it with Claire Claremont. He got her pregnant. So, I mean, Lord Byron knew how to party. And they were all doing it in Switzerland.
And doing it good.
Yeah. And they had a great time that summer. So, nobody's saying that these guys aren't incredibly talented with flamboyant, beautiful, words and stuff like that.
But they're also pigs.
Yeah. Right. All right. Sure.
But
It's just like,
out of that summer, that ghost story contest comes, one of the most famous horror stories of all time, Frankenstein.
right. So Mary,
Frankenstein.
Dr. Frankenstein. It's Igor. So Mary's idea is this idea of bringing someone back to life, and then it's horrific, So that's her inspiration is this story that became Frankenstein. Meanwhile, Lord Byron works on a story about a vampire, and then Dr. Polidori uses that as inspiration to write his own work in 1819, The Vampire, Vampyr, which becomes, one of the biggest inspirations for Dracula. So from that weekend, from that sex-filled ghost story party weekend, we got Frankenstein and Dracula, which is pretty
Pop
sweet.
culture was forever changed.
Right. Which means we should all probably go to Switzerland to change the world.
And frolic.
Follow their example.
I think that's how they do it.
Gosh.
I think that's how they do it. And they're probably all, it's obviously these guys are hedonists. The Romantics were hedonists. Well, they had a different, they were a lot of them were atheists. They illustrate this really in the movie Gothic. If you guys have seen that movie Gothic, it's Julian Sands, who you guys might recognize from the classic film Warlock. He is the Warlock. He's also the guy that cuts up Sherilyn Fenn in boxing Helena. And Julian Sands plays a wonderful Lord Byron. Gabriel Byrne is Percy Shelley, and Natasha Richardson is Mary Shelley. She's the one that died in that skiing accident that was married to, I've got a very peculiar set of skills. Liam Neeson. That's who I'm thinking of. A very particular set of skills. Sorry. The Taken movies were okay. And it's her death is sad. But she did a great job in Gothic. Now, just a tangent, the cover for Gothic shows this little gremlin-like character on top of Natasha Richardson. And it's a play on The Nightmare, which we just talked, we talked about that painting in an episode a few weeks ago about incubi and succubi.
And the succubus and the
succubi. And so that movie poster is a play on that painting. That's pretty cool. So Gothic is obviously a very fictionalized account But it's a pretty fun movie if you like 1980s British people walking around doing a lot of talking in beautiful scenery. That's the kind of thing.
If you're into that.
That's the genre. British people walking around and talking.
There's a certain kind of person that likes that kind of movie. And if
It's true.
And if you think that British, stuff is, if you don't like PBS, like Masterpiece Theater, don't bother with Gothic. But that's the kind of film it is, and it's great. I enjoyed it. But that's the launching point. Now, she spends the next couple of years of her life, 1816 to 1818, when Frankenstein is published. She spends it, they try to have some kids. She finally has Percy Florence Shelley, and then they finally end up having a child in 1818, and he survives, Percy Florence Shelley. So that's nice. So,
Yay.
But you read about Mary Shelley, and you realize why bringing humans back to life is important to Mary. She had a child that only lived 11 days, and in her journal, she writes things like, I got up, I read, fed the baby, and she didn't even name the kid yet because she was so worried the kid was going to die, so she didn't want to name him. And then the next day, like in the journals, like found baby dead.
That's
and it's just
so
like,
sad.
oh, God. So, that's an oversimplification of that, the novel is some kind of wish fulfillment of being able to bring the dead back to life.
But it's something that's on her mind.
Of course,
Right.
it's something horrible. And this is, remember, she's not even like 20 years old when this stuff happens.
Yeah.
So,
Mortality. So much mortality.
yes, that first child dies and she's 16. So we talk about a teenage girl. You say like, oh, a teenage girl wrote this. Number one, she's a well-educated teenage girl. She's not as educated as Lord Byron or Percy Shelley, who have Eton, they have Oxford, they've got, the Oxbridge education of the upper echelon of British society. But she still has good schooling and stuff because she's still not a pauper or anything like that. Even if her dad's a poor writer, he's still well respected. So what's amazing too is that, the most famous work out of that weekend comes from the person who was educated the least, the youngest. But she, as far as life experience, by that point, she already lost 2 children. So as far as emotional maturity, you'd expect that you have to have some kind of emotional maturity to face down that kind of stuff.
And her father, too, knew a lot of the scientists at the time. And so she was well aware of the hunt for cures and, something called galvanism, which was freaking a lot of people out at that time. Luigi Galvani.
Luigi Galvani.
Yeah, he was able to activate frogs, the dead frogs' leg muscles, through electrical stimulation of the nerve, and then
he hooked him up to a battery.
Yeah, and caused the legs to kick, and so people were really captivated by this, so much so that they would actually do this with humans too, which I find just it's just horrible to think about, that they would execute someone, and then the freshly executed corpse, they would try to reanimate it with electrical impulses. And one guy, they actually were able to activate his jaws, moving around, and one of his eyes opens back up, and people thought, oh my God, you're really bringing this person back to life.
That's horrifying.
They didn't really understand that it was just a mechanism triggering the muscles to move, and you could easily make that mistake if you saw that today, it would just be so horrifying.
The problem with Galvani, though, is that in Italy, now you couldn't get a fresh dead body because you'd have to get it from the police. It'd have to be somebody's executed because no family would let their dead. That's not a Catholic burial to get an electrode put up your butt and then your fingers activated or whatever.
Did they really put it up their
No,
butts?
I don't know, but that is what that.
Okay, I thought it was You were giving us something technical
Well, the
there.
thing,
This
it was
is an
fairly,
educational program, Mike.
it
Yes.
was fairly popular to put electrodes in an animal. Like, this would be something that people would watch. They'd put the electrodes, they'd hook the batteries up to animals, and one of the things it does talk about is sometimes the animals would poop when the electrodes were attached. So that's that's not a joke or anything like that. That's what they talk about.
Okay, there's your educational fact for the day.
Yes.
No,
so that's
one of them.
The thing is, this is what people paid money to watch. So that's what you do in a world without TV. In a world without Netflix, you pay money to watch dead animals poop. When live animals would do it for free.
And they do all the time.
But, okay, so but they couldn't get these bodies in Italy where Galvani was working because the Italians beheaded all of the people they executed. So the Italians beheaded them. So you can't bring a beheaded person back to life or whatever. So it was the English that they had to get bodies from, and so.
Oh, yeah. Wait a second though. I was reading a little bit about this too. That they would they would even try it with some of the beheaded bodies to just get them to sit up.
Oh man!
Headless and just. Can you just
No.
So they did work a little bit with the beheaded bodies as well.
Oh, it just.
Oh, gosh.
Can you imagine
It's
like
just
checking that out,
nasty.
being like, "All right, guys, let's." Because the thing is, first of all, imagine how that smells, and you're gonna pump electricity through it. Now, this is something they really get into. Like, there's this 1970s like 2-part TV miniseries about Frankenstein, and that was the first time I'd seen that when I saw it as a kid. That they showed the frog or whatever with the legs kicking and everything, and then they showed that.
And what was that called?
I believe that was Frankenstein: The Untold Story. And the other thing they would show is like a hand moving. So they'd have a hand cut off, and they could hook up the electrode to it, and then the fingers would move. And so that was Dr. Frankenstein saying that, hey, I know how to do this.
Ah.
And they showed the experimentation before they created the creature. And that was also one of the first Frankensteins I watched where the Frankenstein the creature could talk. And that also used the framing device. So in the original novel, we'll get into real quick. The framing device is that there is a ship going in the Arctic Ocean. I believe it's, so there's a ship in the Arctic Ocean, and they encounter the creature up there. And the creature tells this guy a story, and he's writing it all down in letters. He encounters the creature, and he encounters Frankenstein. I'm sorry, let me go back. He encounters Frankenstein, who had chased the creature down up there, and
Victor Frankenstein. And then we should clarify here that a lot of people, when you hear Frankenstein, they think of the monster, Frankenstein's monster. But really Frankenstein is about Victor Frankenstein and his hubris to try to defeat death and his punishment for that. I mean, that's why it's called the modern day Prometheus, because Prometheus took fire from the gods, just like Victor Frankenstein was trying to take the secret of life from God and conquer death. And so, it's a common misconception when you hear Frankenstein to think of the monster.
And actually, Mary Shelley purposely doesn't name Frankenstein. So when they first had a Frankenstein play that came out in the 1820s, the monster is just listed as a dash. The name of the monster is just listed as a dash. So just like she didn't name her child who had died, Frankenstein doesn't name his creation. And that's a stretch a little bit, but anyway, the framing device, when you talk about the hubris, the framing device is of a ship which is trying to, get into the Arctic Circle or whatever. They run into Victor Frankenstein where he tells them the story, and the idea is the captain of the ship eventually learns that the life of his men is not worth getting to the Arctic Circle, and he learns to get rid of his own hubris and his own ego and turns around. Like, that's the lesson he learns from Frankenstein when Frankenstein tells him the story. And that miniseries also was the first time I was introduced to that part, because I didn't read the book until high school. So I had seen all of the Frankenstein movies that had come out, even like the Sting version with Sting as Dr. Frankenstein. And, The Bride.
Who Wendy loves.
Hey,
Sting's just
He's a good guy.
right, and Sting's like in his early 60s or whatever, and he's still like he's kept it up.
Yeah, he's
So-
taking good care of himself.
Yeah, he's working.
I salute him for that.
He's his tantric exercises work. And so that was the first movie that kind of introduced that idea that electricity bringing things back, not just in the original 1931 version, you see the lightning come down and he presses the switch or pulls that switch and the monster comes alive, and you know that he uses electricity. But the idea that scientists had the thought of reanimating life through electricity I first saw that in that miniseries. And it's kind of want to get to it because it shows that whole thing that people used to watch with the frogs and the animals and then the bee-headed people, those classy Italians.
Gosh.
Are going to do that. So there's a guy named Giovanni Aldini, and Giovanni Aldini, he's taking his example from Luigi Galvani, and so what he tells people that if you give me a dead body, I'm going to bring him back to life.
Oh, come on.
George Foster in 1803 is then executed in London. Now, London law or English law was they had to hang for a full hour before they could be taken down because they have to be shown. You know, the people have to see the wages of their crime. And in 1752, the English even make it part of the law. They try to scare people even more. They're like, hey, if we execute you, we can give your body to science. It's the Murder Act of 1752 is said they're going to dissect the bodies. Animatized is what they called it, to inflict further terror and a peculiar mark of infamy. So that was that's how they would dissuade people from committing crime. Because not only were we going to hang you until you were dead, we're going to cut you up, give your body to science.
Wow.
And Aldini, he comes to buy the body. He comes to buy this George Foster in 1803. And he's the nephew of Luigi Galvani. And so he thinks, he takes his uncle's ideas a step further after his uncle dies. And he's like, you know what? Frogs can move. Can't sheeps, pigs, cows, oxen, can't they all do it? The animals can do it. And he's been practicing it. And he's like, I got to get on people. I got to bring him back to the University of Bologna. I'm sorry, Bologna. He actually was.
I like the University of Bologna better.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of paranormal people we know who have their degrees from the University of Bologna.
That's right.
But what happens is he plugs Foster in. He attaches probes and electrodes to his arms and legs, chest and forehead. Starts the battery. Right away, and this is in his words, the jaw began to quiver. The adjoining muscles were horribly contorted and the left eye opened. So people were watching there, and that makes it look like he's coming back to life. His eye opened. And this guy had already he'd been hung for an hour, and then he'd been put on the cart or whatever, taken all the way to Italy for this to be continued. And it took hours. He's plugged in, and people even think that they get an inhalation. People think that they see he inhales. And they're like, holy crap, this works. But the battery runs out and the body stops moving completely. So people kind of realize that, you can't, the electricity makes
That
things
was a
move.
trick. Yeah.
But without the electricity, nothing works. Like the electricity doesn't just restart the human. It doesn't reignite the fire of life.
Also, the person is just twitching and not actually.
Yeah. Like he comes back and goes, "Hey dudes, what's going on?"
Hey man.
Well, and here's something that I think that people who haven't read the Frankenstein book, or even if they've just watched the Kenneth Branagh movie or other modern movies, they don't realize that the Frankenstein in Mary Shelley's book, the Frankenstein's monster in Mary Shelley's book, like quotes John Milton. He quotes politics of the time.
He's really he's self-educated because he runs away, and then he's able to find this little hovel where he's able to watch people like neighbors as
He's a peeping
them.
Frank.
And then Yeah, he's a peeping Frank, and then he also has all these books that I don't know I can't remember where he gets them, but he has all these classics, and so he's reading all the classics, and he's like, I'm ready to be a person now, yay! And then he comes out, and it doesn't work out so
well. No, but the idea, I mean,
when people see what he looks like,
right? Because the thing is, he educates himself, and this part's a little ridiculous in Mary Shelley's book, because the idea that he can teach himself how to read, teach himself how to talk by listening to what this family that he peeping Franks for months. He teaches himself how to talk, and eventually teaches himself how to read. And then he's reading John Milton and quoting it like a genius. That's the romantic coming through. That's Mary Shelley's romantic influences, coming through it. And it's not meant to be, like when we think about Frankenstein, it's not meant to be verite. It's not meant to be a real life kind of thing, obviously. That this, because Victor Frankenstein brings him back to life. And it's funny, we were just talking about electricity. In the original version of the novel, which she had to publish, number one, anonymously, so people would buy it and be interested in it, not that because it wasn't written by a woman, which is why she published it anonymously.
So that they wouldn't know.
In the original version, it's like maths and alchemy that he uses to make the monster come back. It's not until her 1832 she revises it to include the electricity. So I never knew that before, because that's the only version I've read. I haven't read the original. So the only version I've read is the 1832 revisions, where she adds the electrical portion to it. And that's what, Hollywood has obviously, hung their hat on the whole electricity idea, and that runs through every version of Frankenstein, that the monster is brought back to life through electricity. But also in the Hollywood versions, the monster's a mute, like that original 1931 is like, rawr, rawr, rawr. Like, remember when Saturday Night Live had like a Christmas card from Tonto, Frankenstein, and I can't remember the third, but they had this Christmas card, and it was like John Lovitz as Tonto, Phil Hartman as Frankenstein, and then they had a third person, I can't remember, but it was all people who would have no command of English. And the idea was like they're singing Christmas songs to it, and it's like, and it's ridiculous. Or think about Young Frankenstein, when Peter, that whole he goes through putting on the Ritz, and then Peter Boyle comes out, like, put on the Ritz, that whole thing. That It's so funny, because Gene Wilder, he's so classy when he's doing the dance and everything, and then the monster just like, put on the red, and it's so funny. I can watch that 100 times and it still makes me laugh. But it's that idea that the monster is like, he's strong, powerful, but an idiot or can't speak. And in Mary Shelley's novel, the monster is so erudite. How do I say that word?
Erudite. Erudite.
You are
erudite. I like that. Your face is erudite, Mike.
Yeah, it's true. I also said hors d'oeuvres for years. And I said
hors d'oeuvres.
And I said debacle,
too.
Because if you never hear people say it, you just read it. You're like, well, we got ourselves into a real debacle with this
Debacle.
one. You're an idiot, Mike.
A debacle of hors d'oeuvres.
A debacle of erudite hors d'oeuvres. No, so the thing is, in the original novel, Mary Shelley really portrays him, and this is where, like, hubris is one example of the novel, and that's the one that we use most when we talk about it. Frankenstein, the doctor, Victor, he's overreaching his power as a human being, but also, it's a radical political idea at the time too, in that Frankenstein is this, creation. He's controlled by his creator. He's obsessed with finding his creator. He's obsessed with making his way in the world. He's obsessed with learning something about himself. And he's denied every opportunity because he's horrific.
Well, right. And he wants what we all want. And I think Mary Shelley, made him so erudite. So to shed light on the fact that, people are still ruled by what someone looks like rather than the content of their character. And because the Frankenstein monster he's aspiring to greatness and purity, and nobody lets him do that. They put him in this box as this monster.
Well, he is a monster, though. He kills Victor's brother. He kills Victor's best friend.
Okay, hang on. Hang on. He's forced into that, I think, where he's like trying to be something else, and nobody will accept him as that. And he's like, all right, then.
I'll just kill your family. Like,
all right, you want me to be a monster? I'll be a monster. You're going to love it.
Sad.
I think this is an example, though, of Mary Shelley using this as a political warning. And it's funny because Frankenstein is used in slavery discussions and slavery arguments in the 1820s and the 1830s. In fact, Frankenstein's monster in some, as they were doing the like illustrations and stuff like that, they portray Frankenstein's monster as black. And
wow,
even though England had not allowed, they took away the legality of importing slaves in 1808, they still had, the big conversation was still about slaves in the colonies because they had Jamaica and everything, they had all these places where slaves are still allowed. And they would use Frankenstein and the fact that he committed violence as, that was just the example they gave. They were like, hey, these people, have the minds of adults, or have the bodies of adults and stuff like that, but they still have the minds of children. So if we give them freedom, then, they're going to turn on us. And so people and they're just going to be like Frankenstein and his monster. And it's that idea too that, I don't think Mary Shelley had slavery in mind, even though they were all abolitionists. Like Lord Byron, Mary Shelley, her father, like they were all very heavily abolitionist. I think some of the parallel she was trying to make was more to like the poor people, the impoverished, the hoi polloi. That the thing is, when the aristocracy, rich bastards like Victor Frankenstein, take advantage or leave them behind, they're going to get violent about it.
Right, and they're going to fulfill the roles that they're forced into.
And she had the French Revolution off with their head. Robespierre and the Reign of Terror. She had that entire period of history to draw from. That sometimes that violent retribution happens. And then Marx obviously takes that for his own when he's like, the workers rise up, kill the man. His deal. So, the thing about Frankenstein is it works on a lot of levels. And Mary Shelley is by the time it actually comes out, but it publishes, she's 20 years old, but she starts writing it when she's 18. And that is tremendous accomplishment for anybody.
That's amazing.
We talked about some of the people that inspired, Mary Shelley a little bit. We talked about, Galvini and Aldani, and, the poor George Foster who had the electrode shoved in him, and people had to watch him die over and over again.
What a horrible, thing to do to a corpse.
Even a convicted murderer like that. So you think when death isn't enough.
Right, exactly.
But we take Frankenstein as an example of hubris. And, that's when we talk about modern stuff. That's always, they say it like the tech people and everything like that's supposed to be their lesson. Like, well, if we don't watch out where we go with technology, it will destroy us. Like Frankenstein's monster destroyed Victor and ruined his life.
Right.
Well.
The gray goo. With artificial intelligence too, that's gonna take over.
Yeah, well, that's Stephen Hawking. They always have some warning in Stephen. Stephen Hawking is always the guy giving the warning.
Right?
It's always Stephen Hawking saying, "Be careful who you talk to in the universe," because every time a couple of cultures have clashed, the one with superior technology always destroys it. And be careful of artificial intelligence because they'll decide man is not worthy.
Right, and be careful of nanotechnology because it'll turn us all into gray goo.
And of course, we trust him because he's like the smartest guy on the planet. So, you have to trust him.
Except that he is now dead.
So he was. He's the smartest corpse on the planet. And
but we can reanimate him. We can make him better and stronger.
Can we shove an electrode up Stephen Hawking's butt and bring the smartest man back?
Oh, too soon.
Oh, he would have laughed at that. He would have laughed like this. Ha, ha, ha.
You know.
Oh, My God.
Enough.
Well, you're editing this,
Oh,
Wendy.
come on.
So
We can make fun.
you can make
I'm not
Mike
editing
seem
that
like a
out.
nicer
If
guy.
we can make
than
fun
he
of
is.
Stephen Hawking, who can we make fun of? He atheist anyway. Like he cares.
Just because he's an atheist doesn't mean that he's not watching us
That's
right
true.
now. He's probably in the afterlife going, damn it.
Damn it. All right. No, he gets his.
I thought it was all
He gets
over.
his voice back.
It keeps going on and
No.
on. That stupid wheel of
Right,
life.
he just has to hang out with his first wife in the afterlife.
Oh,
Hey,
nice.
I'm not the guy that married my nurse. So
This is really.
okay, we're not
Getting
worrying
ugly
about
here.
we're not talking about Dr. Hawking.
We're off the
we
rails.
are talking. What we are talking about Frankenstein's though is that people are still trying to bring the dead back to life. In fact, number one, we've got this Italian surgeon. So it seems like the Italians who are ones who always want to bring people back to life, and he wants to do it in Ingolstadt, in I think in Bavaria, where Frankenstein originally studied, where it took place. Let's see, what's his full name here? Dr. Canavero. Dr. Canavero even says, he even uses Frankenstein to introduce his idea of the world's first full human head transplant.
Yes.
Oh,
That's-
that concept is wow.
My dream to perform the first head transplant and start the greatest revolution in the history of mankind, no less. And the
Okay,
dream
so-
is fast becoming a reality.
Oh gosh.
Okay, so this is not a new idea, though. In the 80s, starting in the 80s, there was a doctor, Dr. Robert White, in the United States, who was performing head transplants on dogs and then later monkeys. And he proposed and he also patented a technology for doing a human head transplant.
What?
So this is
Wow.
not new.
This has been going on for a long time.
I mean, he, I don't think he was ever able to, he was never able to perform surgery on a human, but he did do it with animals. And he would take the head of one rhesus monkey and transplant it onto the head of another. And then see how long, and there's actually film of this too, see how long the animal would last. And he was able to keep them alive for probably about 45 minutes. I think that was the limit. But like,
That's really gross.
you can watch film of seeing the monkey wake up on another body and open its eyes and stuff like that.
Right, and so it's probably at that point,
Yeah.
it's probably just reacting out of sheer, like, or it's not. It's probably not even. It's just
Right,
It's,
it's
it's
just
like
Nerves.
it's just those galvanized. It's just those galvanized nerves looking around, just like George Foster opening his eye and breathing.
Yeah, could be. I don't know, but I just wanted to share that research has been going on for a while, and it just made news recently with this Italian
Well,
doctor.
also too, there's that whole the Japanese scientist, like the Japanese Dr. Mengele. What was it, Sector 237, or I can't remember the name of it, but they did a ton of transplanted limbs on soldiers, on prisoners of war, and things. And of course, Dr. Mengele, he transplanted a few limbs himself to see what he could do, because he had the carte blanche and they had the humans to play with, so they did, and none of it worked. It's all, everybody died. It was all a horror show and absolutely disgusting and horrifying. And so, I mean, people have been trying to do this for a long time. I mean, that's the whole basic. Remember Futurama? They have all those heads in jars. That's the idea. Like Leonard Nimoy's head in the jar, Richard Nixon's head in the jar becomes president in the year 3000.
right.
And that's what they said with Ted, like Walt Disney's head in the jar. They say that in real life, Walt Disney was frozen. They have his head. But that's just a rumor. But Ted Williams, the baseball player, like, that's not a rumor. Like, his head's somewhere in Arizona. And when I go into
Right.
cryogenic freezing, my head's going to be somewhere.
I was just gonna ask. I thought you said you wanted to keep your head in a jar or something.
Hell yeah, I want to keep my head. I'll be dead. What do I care?
Until they attach you to some other body.
Right. And then, I mean, but the thing is, like, any brain matter or whatever. Anyway,
But what if it's like a
I think-
dolphin body or something?
What? That'd be awesome. Then I can swim. And dolphins are already.
It could be Arnold. It could be Arnold.
Okay, there we go.
I could finally be in the body I deserve instead of this fat Polish loud ass.
Oh my gosh.
So yeah, it would be great. But anyway, so that human head technology, and then there's one more company who's trying to do it. They're trying to use stem cells though. So this company, Philadelphia-based BioQuark, is trying to inject stem cells into the spinal cords of people who have declared clinically brain dead. The subjects will also receive an injected protein blend. So I don't know if they use pea protein, whey protein, what kind of protein they use.
Protein.
Yeah, these protein
Delicious
shakes.
protein
It's the
blend.
chocolate shakes. Those taste great. Electrical nerve stimulation. So we're going back to Galvini's stuff.
Yeah, galvanism.
250 years ago. And laser therapy directed at the brain. So they put lasers in your brain. The ultimate goal is to grow new neurons and spur them to connect to each other and thereby bring the brain back to life. This is June 1st, 2017. So this is just last year, this BioQuark company. And originally, they were supposed to be doing research in India. But then the Indian government's like, what do you know?
Get out of here. I don't know. I like the idea of the protein blend and the lasers in my brain. I think I'm okay with
I don't know
that.
about this electrical stimulation, even though this is full disclosure here. I did buy that belt with the abs, that ab belt, the abdominizer, back 15 years ago. I thought I'd give it a shot, where it just electrically stimulates your stomach, so you have abs while you're sitting on the couch.
I've seen the infomercial.
The abdominizer. It was called the abdominizer.
Wow.
It was
Do you still have it?
I threw that out.
I think I could use some abdominizing, Mike. Come on,
My
I'm
girlfriend at the
desperate.
time was like, I don't know why she believed it. She's like, wow, that looks like a really great idea. And I'm like, I don't think so. She's like, we should get it.
Oh, sure. It was all her idea.
I like the idea of getting a six-pack while sitting on the couch watching TV.
Yeah,
Come
me
on,
too.
who doesn't?
And the commercial made it look so good, like that fat just melted right off. And so, but I tried it out, and it kind of stung. And
Yeah, it
yeah,
hurts.
and so I never got any real
Results from
six
that.
pack out of it.
Oh.
Oh, I got 6 volts, not a
You were
6
like,
pack. Hey.
Aw, you're like, it hurts too much. I can't pay attention to my
I
show.
can't watch my show,
I gotta take the
and I
belt
can't have the
off.
abdominizer.
I got a little
Getting
twinge
so huge.
from the abdominizer.
How am I ever going to get a 6-pack now? So here's the thing. I mean, so these guys think that in Latin America they'll be able to do their studies too. Like they think that life is cheap enough in Latin America that they can make this happen. This BioQuark company, and they're like, no, they're totally serious. But I mean, scientists are like, this is not going to work. Even though, I mean, stem cells have been shown in children with brain damage and stuff to, the neurons are starting to connect with each other again.
And lasers in the brain. It sounds pretty cool.
I was gonna say that sounds like some real sciencey business, right there. So anyway, 200 years of Frankenstein. It's inspiring us today, just as much as it did people. I mean, like they said, people were writing about it in the 1820s. People were using it in their political debates in the 1830s and 40s. Obviously, the movies came out in the 1930s, and we use Frankenstein and Victor Frankenstein and his quest to end death as an example of human science overreach and man's hubris. I mean, fairly frequently. So this 18-year-old girl came up with something pretty freaking sweet.
Yeah. Happy birthday, Frankenstein monster.
200 years in, and there's also a new Frankenstein movie, and that's not a Frankenstein. It's a movie about Mary Shelley.
That'd be interesting.
Coming out in a couple weeks. It's called Mary Shelley. So if you guys see a movie called Mary Shelley, it's about the chick we're talking about here, guys. And it looks pretty cool. And so it'll be fun. And I'd like to see how they keep to that night where they're all partying in, Lake Geneva in 1816, that year without a summer. And I'd like to see how they portray that as compared to Gothic's version, which is obviously romanticized and everything's crazy and everybody has hallucinations and things like that. And then British people, walking around talking.
As you do.
Sometimes frolicking.
Those Brits, they're always walking around talking.
Those Brits walking around talking, well...
Who do they think they are?
The thing is, Dr. Paul, Lord Byron and Percy Shelley and Mary Shelley in particular had a weird kind of relationship going on. In fact, even if you Google like literature's greatest threesomes, that's like the number one that comes up. And so all these weird love triangles and free love, well, sometimes it's just too many people involved. There's too many cooks in that love kitchen. And so this particular Sunspot song we're talking about this week is inspired when, not necessarily by free love, but the idea that sometimes in a group when there's, 3 or more people put together, and 2 forces become diametrically opposed to each other and start pushing the whole group apart. And this song is called 3 Corners.
You can't make it on your own, so you take away my only friend. I see the nothing you're pointing at my back, trying to take away my only friend I ever had. Reach for your guns, I'm ready for war. Fight to the death, let's settle the score. Try to take me down, I'll tear out your heart. Fight to the death, so you won't hurt me no more.
I'll say my love is stronger than you've ever known.
I'll say you'll understand after you are gone.
I'll say that friendship lies in more than just words. Love lies in jealousy and corners never heard. You think this is just a game?
Tell me that when I'm tearing out your heart, you raise the next when my head is on the block, trying to take away my only friend I ever had. Reach for your guns, I'm ready for war. Fight to the death, let's settle the score. Try to take me down, I'll tear out your heart. Fight to the death, so you won't hurt me no more.
I'll say my love is stronger than you've ever known.
I'll say you'll understand after you are gone.
I'll say that friendship lies in more than just words. Our circle has 3 corners and I know how much it hurts.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. You can find us online at othersidepodcast.com. Until next time, see you on the other side.
And we don't want to have too much hubris like Dr. Frankenstein, Wendy.
No, we certainly don't.
We want to make sure to thank our Patreon community, othersidepodcast.com/donate, the awesome Patreons who we just hung out
So
with last
great.
Wednesday, talked about ghosts in the hood. And so we'll be doing another Patreon hangout this month. You'll get to meet some cool people like maybe Dr. Ned, who is at the Patreon level where he gets a shout out in every single episode.
Yes. Thank you, Ned.
Yeah, and thank you everybody who's part of that community that helps keep the podcast flowing, helps with server costs, helps keep Other Side Podcast rolling over great topics like Mary Shelley and Frankenstein and the modern Prometheus and her great impact on science fiction and the world. So all you guys have a great impact on us and help what we do every single week. So if you guys want to be part of that very cool Patreon community, where do they find it?
othersidepodcast.com/donate. Thanks again, everyone. Have a great week. Da 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 da.
And we would be Frankenstein's.
Da 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 da.
Put on the ring.